Good afternoon, folks. Here we are, and the title of this presentation is How to Mount a Solar System to Survive a Hurricane. Uh, if you are following this series of videos, you know that we are located in Puerto Rico, and time to time we receive one of these big guys. And if you are familiar with hurricanes, basically they go counterclockwise when they are getting in, and with that said, meaning that we're going to experience wind coming from the north, and those winds are bad because those ones are on the back of the panel, and they will create a lot of lift and drag forces depending of the angle that we have this panel installed. Then when the eye of the hurricane go away, then we start to experience wind coming from the south, but those ones are in the front of the panel. They are not that bad as the one coming from the back that are trying to make our solar panel looks more like an airplane wing, and that's not good. So the idea is to, go through what are the parameters that we need to set. Like for example, what is the angle for the solar panel, and then what are the forces that are developed according to the wind speed, and using some CFD simulation, and then what are the tributary forces that are required, like for example, in each pole as shown here, for example here. So eventually those forces will become any like a bending moment and some lift forces that need to be resisted by this bolt. And that's the idea. All right. So with that said, like for example, in Puerto Rico, as you might know, we experienced a hurricane on September 20 of 2017, and it packed winds of about 155 miles per hour, and we felt sustained wind of 64 miles per hour with gusts reaching 113. And when the Hurricane Maria, went through Yabucoa, we have wind gusts about 109 miles per hour, getting close to 118 miles per hour at Camp Santiago, as they were measured about, I believe that they are about 10 meters from ground. So, I mean, the huge, humongous wind, and that they will create a disaster. As shown here, you cannot even see Puerto Rico is behind all this hurricane, as shown here. So, well, hurricane create disaster, and this is what we got after Hurricane Maria. Pretty much all our electrical system was shut down. This is a solar farm in Humacao was pretty much destroyed, and that's the sad face of what happened aftermath. This is what we get, you know. So after Maria, we stay about 30 days. I mean, in my location, we stay about 30 days without electricity. So I decide by June 2018, that's about a year later, that I would not go through that process anymore of being without electricity without, for so long time. And I decide to build up a small emergency system that has been running since then. And basically, our six solar panels, as shown here, they're small. You don't have to be big. This is what I call an emergency system. In other videos, I talk about the installation costs and everything else, but so far, uh, the idea is that they produce about 1400 watts. And but this video is about how I anchor them, and that's basically the idea. Again, you can see that they are not actually at a, I would say, to a high angle of attack. It's more like less than 10 degrees, and they are less than 10 degrees. And the reason, it will be shown very, very soon why I have a small angle of attack, which within another video I might show you that it's not worth it to have. In Puerto Rico, it's very common to have about 18 degrees the angle of your solar panel installation, but I will say you don't even have to reach that high. Less than 10 will do fine and will expose your solar panel to destructive wind to a lesser point. and that's what we really want. So this whole setup was discussed in another video, so I will not talk about it. So the idea is this. So you have winds coming from the back of the panel, and you can go through the 710 guideline, ASCE 710, and you can calculate with that guideline the pressure that that your panel need to resist. That pressure that will depend obviously at the wind speed. 180 is part of that regulation. We have to be Puerto Rico need to be designed for those type of wind, 180 miles per hour. So I picked that number from there, which makes a lot of sense. That number, since in the previous slide, I show you that we have winds not close to 180, but about 118 were the maximum somehow. With that number, then we calculate the actual wind speed that the solar panel will need to resist. Again, that actual speed end up being about 125, which is still above the 118 that we saw before. Now, I changed that to meters per second because we're going to do now CFD, computational fluid dynamics, because we want to calculate the coefficient of drag and coefficient of lift. So with those numbers, when you calculate this number, and this number comes from SolidWorks, the part of simulation for CFD, when you get those numbers, then it's easy to calculate the total forces that your solar panel will experience. And those forces come out like this. Total force will be, the drag force will be about 1,300, and the lift force will be about 2,000. That's a lot of forces on the 3 solar panels. So the question is how we do to understand what will be the anchor. What were the forces and bending moment that we need to deal with it here. So that means that we're going to talk about a tributary portion of all those of that total force, and that end up being a force, the drag force about 443 and a lift force of 667. So with that said, this is what we need to do. Very simple. We prepare our system, and basically the short leg here is about 8 inches from the floor. That means that depending on what what degree you want to put your system. Let's say that this system was put at 30 degrees. In Puerto Rico, that's not necessary at all to get that to that high degree. I'm only doing this as entertaining what will happen when you have very high, a high angle of attack, and the wind is coming from the north through this side. So you will experience very high forces, and the tributary forces on these 2 anchor points would be 443 on the drag and 667 on the lift, as shown here. So what is the idea of having those forces there? Well, we need to calculate now what are the responses to those forces to ensure that the system stay in place. So that's the main idea. A photograph just showing you how my system, or how I anchor my system actually. As you can see, there's this leg is coming, is anchored, the solar panel is anchored to this leg, and then this leg is anchored eventually to the floor, a concrete floor, as shown in this photograph. This leg here is about 4 inches in length. So the idea is that the forces that are, that the solar panel is resistant, eventually is going to be passed to here, to the bending moment, creating a bending moment and a lift force that this ball need to take care of. So if you do an analysis of those forces, you end up with some bending moment right at the anchor point. Like, for example, this is about 180, and this is about 351 pounds per foot. Wow, this is big. This is a big number. We'll tell you in a sec. I don't see it anymore. This seems like it's the biggest bending moment that I can see on my analysis. And with that said, just as a reference, 355 pound per pound per foot is also like a torque. It is a torque. And it just remind me an engine that I'm very familiar with, which is a Mustang V8 engine, and the torque that is developed by this type of engine is about close to 350 as well. So it's kind of interesting. that the number looks like. So what's the point? The point that I'm trying to make is that with 1 volt, you want to try to hold a V8 engine. That's what the point that I'm trying to say here. You might be able, yes, maybe not, but but that's the idea that you need to go through to understand that we are concentrated now. How can we provide enough anchor point here to ensure that we can resist that bending moment and these lift forces? So with that said, this is the idea. So here we are. We have a lift force coming up and a bending moment. And this part here is this part in blue as shown here. And this here is the bolt that I'm showing here. And from here to here is this distance, about 1.5. And from the center of this bolt to here is another 1.5 inches. With that said, basically, the idea is the part in blue with this force that I'm showing here, the idea is to resist the bending moment and the lift forces. So this point here will be the rotation point. That's what I'm saying. That will be the rotation point for this analysis. So here I will do a bending moment analysis, and just to calculate this force Fr, and assuming that again that the rotation is right here, and this is a very rigid aluminum section. All right. So here is the calculation for the reaction force, and eventually you get about 3,000 on the reaction force, but then you need to add also the lift force. So this ball need to hold for 3,300 pounds. Wow, that's basically an SUV, right? That's a lot of forces within 1 volt. So, but again, how will you do that? Let's see if 1 volt is enough, and that will definitely will depend on many things. Like for example, this is one of my preferred way to do anchoring of solar panel. It's just using wedge anchor type of bolts, and particularly the 3/8 is one of my preferred one for this small system. And the 3A, depending of the depth that you go with the bolt, it can have different forces. Like for example, 1600, 3400, and almost 500 pounds of tension, depending of the type of concrete you have. You have an FC with 2,000 psi. You analyze here. If you have a 4,000 psi, you analyze here, and so forth. Typically, we are here about 2,000, and meaning that the bolt and the depth that I'm using will depend what's the number that will be shown here. You know, I will say this data is okay, but you need one more piece of data just to get an idea of what's happening here, and you need this one. This one will tell you precisely what is the effective length that you need to put your bolt within the concrete so that it will hold the force that is quoted. Like for example, the slab that my roof has is about 4 inches. So I cannot go like for example for 3 or 3.5, because that would require a slab with a higher thickness. So given that my slab, my concrete roof is about 4 inches, then I am around here, either 1.5, 2 inches at the most. Sorry, hit this one because I'm using the 3/8 ankle ball. So I will go for 134. Will never get to here because that would exceed the thickness of the concrete slab. So I'm right here. Actually, this is what I typically do. It's about 1.75, and that's the depth that you will go. With that in mind, basically that you might have a little bit higher than the 1600, a little bit higher, but I stay with the 1620, and that will do as a safety factor. So eventually, if you are, since the force that you are, when you break out all the forces at the 30 degrees, you end up with a 3,300 pounds, that means that you need at least 2 bolts. One bolt for this particular case, uh, with such a high angle, would not do it. I mean, that's the bottom line. You have to have more bolts, at least 2 bolts to ensure. Or again, if your slab allow it, you can have. I mean, like for example, if your slab is about 6 inches, then you can have you can install the 1/2 ankle bolt, and that they will do. I mean, if you go back here for 1 second in the 1/2 section, either you see the numbers right here, you can get about 5,000 without any problem, and you can take a look at it. And so you definitely can resist with one bolt those kind of situation, if that were the case, which is not, because I never installed solar panel at 30 degrees. In fact, I don't like the 18-degree either. So I are more in less than 10 degrees. If we do a back again the analysis of CFD, computational fluid dynamics, we can get the lift coefficient, the drag coefficient, and all that goodies. Eventually, you end up right here. That the angle now require a short leg. Last one was about 30. This one is about 15 degrees. So now you get here about 10 degrees. This leg is about the same, 8 inches. So, but the forces now, the drag forces and lift forces have dropped substantially. Again, this is at 10 degrees. At 10 degrees, still at the 180 miles per hour as per the code. Now you do back again the analysis. As you can see, bending forces and lift forces really get to a lower values, and that's basically it was expected. So still, we need to be sure that we can properly anchor our system. And so, for example, this 88 seems to be the highest bending moment, and we have 142 the lift force, but it needs to be obviously anchored here by this bolt. So let's see how this work out. And if we go to this last slide on this, like for example, bending moment 88, lift force at 150, about 150. Let's see if what I got here, 150, 150. Should have put like 142 because that's the one I see, but it's okay. I can double check that later. But about 150, that means that I have a bending moment of about in inches of about 1000. And so these are the distance. Eventually, the force at the toe is about 854, meaning that the total force on my bolt is about 1,000. No problem. About using one anchor bolt the way I use it, it's no problem when your solar panel are installed properly at the proper angle. In this case, less than 10 degrees, that will do. In fact, my solar panel are installed about 5 degrees, so they're even lower. Just because when it rains, I want that the water, kind of drip out without uh, creating ponds or anything above, so over my solar panels. So that's basically the idea. Now, checking remember I'm using L type of beams, meaning that there's going to be some bending moment on this units somewhere, and I want to be sure that the amount of stress applied to it will be resisted by the thickness that I'm using. The thickness for this L unit that I'm using is about 0.125 inches. They are 2 by 2 with 0.125. I would not use less than 2. I like the 2 by 2 by 0.125. It worked out okay. Apply stress about 3600, and that would be about almost 4 KSI. Commercial aluminum T6. This might be the hardest part actually. It's just to ensure what the vendor is, selling you. But I will get with the, I will say this is basically the 24 KSI. maximum allowed stress, and that would provide a safety factor of about 6, 7, which is for me is okay. I mean, I had tried to bend some of these guy in some separate experiment, and they are extremely hard. You have to really, really pound the guy just to bend it. So, well, that's it. Let's see if I got anything else to say. Nope, that sounds super. That's it. Those are the forces involved, and this is how you do it. You want to know more about the software that I use for some of these calculations, just let me know. Have a great day. Bye.